An emergency dispatch came in at midnight. An apartment building was on fire, with a couple trapped inside. When I burst through the flames, I saw Samantha, my wife of 7 years, lying naked and wrapping her arms around another man. Both of them were semi-unconscious from the heavy smoke, but Samantha was still mumbling that man's name. Later, I let go of the past and filed for divorce to start my new life. But Samantha regretted it. She held on to me tightly, crying and claiming I was her only true love. She thought I would soft-hearted again, but everyone around us just laughed at her. Is she crazy? His kid is already in school, and she's still here begging for a second chance. Thick smoke billowed through the hallway. I navigated through the darkness, breathing heavily through my oxygen mask. Our station got the dispatch call in the middle of the night. It happened to be my shift. A neighbor had called 911. The fire started in the kitchen of the adjacent apartment. By the time the neighbor woke up coughing from the smoke and called for help, the fire had already spread. It was a messy situation. The caller said a young couple lives here. Once we're inside, we split into 2 search and rescue teams. I ordered. I took the lead and kicked the door open. But before I could give the signal to split up, I froze. Right past the doorway, a naked woman lay slumped on the floor. It looked like she had used every ounce of her strength to crawl to the exit, only to collapse at the very last second. Not far from her lay a naked man. Their bodies were tangled together. The woman's face was one I knew better than my own. It was Samantha, my wife, whom I had loved for 8 years. And the man beside her was no stranger either. It was Julian, her childhood best friend. Standing in the swirling black smoke, I felt like I had been hit by a bolt of lightning. My mind went completely blank. Just before I left for my shift tonight, Samantha had wrapped her arms around my neck, kissing me passionately. Because of the danger of my job, I went into every shift prepared for the worst. Samantha always worried about me. Every time she saw me off, she would cling to me, refusing to let go. I couldn't believe my eyes. I prayed the toxic smoke was making me hallucinate. Was I dying? Was this a nightmare? Beside me was Mason, my best friend on the squad. He knew Samantha. He recognized her instantly, lying there completely naked. I could feel him stiffen beside me, shocked into silence. Through the haze, Samantha wasn't fully unconscious yet. Spotting the flashlights of the rescue crew, she found a burst of weak strength. She mumbled, Julian, don't be scared. They're here to save us. Hold on. My body shook violently. My last shred of hope shattered into dust. It was so disgusting. So painful. My head felt like it was going to explode. Someone nudged me from behind. It was my teammates. I forced my body to move like a machine. I didn't even remember how we carried out the rescue. I didn't remember how we dragged those 2 naked bodies out of the burning apartment. I threw a blanket over them. Even as they were loaded into the ambulance, barely conscious, their hands remained tightly clasped together. I collapsed onto the pavement. My teammates rushed over, checking on me in confusion. They had never seen me like this and thought I was physically hurt. I was hurt. In my rush to get out, I had scraped my wrist against a sharp metal hook on the doorframe. A chunk of flesh was gone, and blood was dripping onto the concrete. An EMT rushed over to bandage me. Surrounded by the flashing red and blue lights, I was pushed toward an ambulance. I didn't know where I was going, and I didn't care. The pain was unbearable. But it wasn't my wrist. My entire body felt numb. It was weird. The cut was deep, and there was so much blood. It should have stung. But I felt nothing. All I knew was that tonight Samantha, the woman I had cherished for 8 years, had dealt me a fatal blow. It hurt 100 times worse than dying in that fire. I curled up on a bench in the hospital hallway. Just a wall away, Samantha and her beloved Julian were being treated. I was in a daze, unable to separate reality from a nightmare. Samantha was my first love, the first girl I had ever opened my heart to. I loved her with everything I had. I did everything to make her happy. Our first meeting felt like a gentle touch of fate. It was a sunny afternoon at the college library. She was sitting by the window, a soft beam of light catching the edges of her hair. At that moment, time had stopped. Samantha was beautiful and smart. Her smile could warm the coldest winter, and I fell hard and fast. Our love grew deeper with each passing season, solid and comforting. Then Julian came back, like a sudden storm that wrecked our quiet life. He was Samantha's childhood friend, a fashion designer. We had met a few times. At first, I thought he was just a charming, artsy guy. My job as a firefighter meant I worked long, grueling shifts. Overtime was normal. I spent my rare free days working on side gigs, wanting to build a better financial future for Samantha. Samantha used to tease me, calling me an unromantic block of wood. But her eyes had always been full of love. But as Julian hung around more and more, things changed. Julian always knew how to make her laugh. He took her to fancy art galleries and trendy parties, things I couldn't afford or didn't have time for. With my crazy schedule, I started to feel inadequate. I kept telling myself that Samantha's feelings for Julian were strictly platonic. But insecurity grew in my heart like weeds. His presence threw a shadow over our marriage. Still, I trusted her. Our bond was built on years of shared dreams. I started blaming myself. I realized I shouldn't neglect her just because I was working hard. In fact, I had planned to take her on a romantic getaway to Hawaii right after this shift. I never, not even in my worst nightmares, thought Samantha would cheat on me. That was why the pain was so agonizing. The trust one had held onto so fiercely had turned into a knife in my chest. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. I buried my face in my knees, too broken to let anyone see me. "Logan." A soft, gentle voice called out. I blinked and looked up. A nurse holding a medical tray stood before me, looking incredibly worried. "I'm on duty tonight," she said softly. "Mason told me what happened. He asked me to check on you." It was Lily, Mason's younger sister. Seeing a familiar, kind face, the dam broke. All my agony rushed to the surface. I choked back a sob, desperate to let it out. Why? Why would she do this to me? What did I do wrong? Samantha, why? I cried like a child, completely losing my grip. Lily placed her tray on the bench and sat beside me, gently patting my shoulder. "Let it out, Logan. You don't have to be strong right now." I checked her chart. Samantha is fine. Just some mild smoke inhalation. She'll be discharged tomorrow after a quick checkup. But that guy. He has some minor burns on his legs. They're keeping him for another day. "Logan, what are you going to do?" I shook my head in utter despair. My mind drifted back to the past. I remembered the day we stood at the altar. Our vows echoed in my ears like they were spoken yesterday. I had been so full of hope. Samantha and I had a whirlwind romance, but her parents disapproved of us from the start. I was an orphan. I had no family, and my job as a firefighter was dangerous and demanding. Samantha was a girl who wanted to be pampered and showered with romantic gestures. My life was rough. I spent my days surrounded by gruff men and burning buildings. My hands were calloused, and my life was simple. Her parents told her flat out that I couldn't give her the dream lifestyle she wanted. I almost walked away back then, but Samantha fought for us. When her parents tried to set her up with rich Ivy League guys, she screamed, "No. I love Logan. Why are you doing this to me? He's the only one I'll ever marry." At that moment, I swore to myself I would spend the rest of my life making her happy. On the day I finally proposed, Samantha looked into my eyes and said, "Everyone says I'm being childish, but I know what I want. I want to spend forever with you. I don't know how long forever is, but I want you to come home safe from every shift. I'll always be waiting at home to give you a big hug." Those memories used to be my sanctuary. Now they were poison. The numbness wore off, and the cut on my wrist began to throb with intense pain. "Lily, you know," I whispered, my voice cracking. When I was just a rookie making pennies, I had no idea what the future held. But Samantha told me I was her future. When I kicked that door open tonight, I expected a lot of things. But not her. They were naked, Lily. And she was screaming his name. It hurt so bad. Lily wrapped an arm around my shoulders. "Logan, you're an amazing guy. Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Think about it. She's loved you for years. Maybe there's an explanation. But no matter what you decide, Mason and I have your back." I was an orphan. Samantha had given me my very first home. We had loved each other so deeply. I decided to give her one last chance. I would do it for the brave girl who had fought her family for me. Just one chance. If she came clean and begged for forgiveness, I would pretend this night never happened. "Please, Samantha, don't make me regret this." The morning sun bled through the hospital blinds, casting long, cold shadows across the tiled floor. I stood outside room 304 for a full 10 minutes, holding a paper cup of warm water until the cardboard softened in my grip. My injured wrist was wrapped tightly in white gauze, throbbing with a dull, rhythmic ache under my jacket sleeve. Inside, I could hear soft laughter. "Julian, stop it. My shoulder still hurts," Samantha's voice drifted through the door. It sounded light, almost playful, not at all like the voice of a woman who had nearly suffocated 6 hours ago. "You were so brave, Sam," Julian replied, his voice thick with unearned tenderness. If the firefighters hadn't broken down the door, I don't know what I would have done. My hand rested on the door handle. The metal felt ice cold against my palm. One chance, I reminded myself, my chest tightening until I could barely breathe. If she looks me in the eye, tells me the truth, and begs for forgiveness, I will bury this night forever. I pushed the door open. The laughter died instantly. Samantha sat on the hospital bed, wearing a pale blue gown. Julian was sitting on the edge of her mattress, his leg wrapped in light bandages, his hand resting casually over hers. When Samantha saw me standing in the doorway, my face smudged with dried soot, my uniform jacket torn, my wrist bandaged, her expression flickered with a brief flash of panic. But it vanished just as quickly, replaced by a look of aggrieved indignation. "Logan." She sat up straighter, wincing slightly. "Where were you? Do you have any idea what I went through last night?" The apartment building caught fire. I could have died. I didn't step further into the room. I just stared at her. I know, I said, my voice hoarse and flat. I was the one who kicked the door open. Samantha froze. Her eyes widened as the realization hit her. You were on duty? Yes, I replied, looking directly into her eyes. Why were you in Julian's apartment at midnight, Samantha? Why were both of you naked on the floor? Julian immediately straightened his shoulders, putting on an arrogant, defensive front. Logan, don't start accusing her of crazy things. I had a sudden fashion emergency. A burst pipe in my bathroom soaked all my design samples. Sam came over to help me dry them out. We spilled water all over our clothes, so we took them off to dry. Then the fire started in the kitchen. It was an accident. A burst pipe. Spilled water. It was the most absurd, insulting lie I had ever heard in my life. I ignored Julian completely, keeping my eyes locked on my wife. Is that what happened, Samantha? You were just helping him dry clothes? Samantha looked at Julian, then at me. Instead of guilt, instead of tearful confessions, her face hardened into a scowl. Why are you questioning me like a criminal? She snapped, her tone rising in anger. I just survived a fire. Julian was terrified. We were panicked. Is your first instinct really to judge me instead of asking if I'm okay? She took a deep breath, turning her face away from me. Besides, Julian has been going through a rough time lately. You're always at work, Logan. You're never home. Julian was there for me when you weren't. We were just comforting each other. Comforting each other. Naked. On the floor. Mumbling his name while her husband broke through the smoke. To save her life. There was no remorse. No shame. Only excuses, gaslighting, and cold blame. Shifted onto my shoulders. The last thread holding my heart together snapped with a quiet, final click. I see, I said. I reached down with my left hand, pulled off the gold wedding band from my ring finger, and walked over to the bedside table. Clink. The heavy gold ring hit the plastic tray, resting right next to a half-eaten bowl of fruit. Samantha gasped, her face draining of color. Logan, what are you doing? I gave you 8 years, I said, my voice so calm it surprised even myself. I worked double shifts so you could buy designer bags. I gave up my sleep so you could have a comfortable home. And last night, I risked my life to drag you out of a fire while you were wrapped around another man. I looked at her one last time. The girl I had loved more than my own life. She looked like a complete stranger. We're done, Samantha. Keep the apartment. Keep Julian. I'm filing for divorce. I turned on my heel and walked out of the room. Logan, stop. Come back here, she screamed behind me, her voice ringing down the hallway. You can't just leave me like this. Logan, I didn't stop. I didn't look back. The divorce process was a war, but not one Samantha fought with grace. When my divorce petition arrived at her parents' house, her mother stormed into the fire station during my afternoon shift, flanked by 2 of Samantha's cousins. You heartless brute. Her mother shrieked in the station lobby, pointing a manicured finger at my face in front of my entire squad. My daughter almost died in a house fire, and you abandoned her on her hospital bed. Is this how you treat the girl who fought her family to marry you? My teammates stood up, their faces dark. Mason stepped forward, but I raised my hand to stop him. I walked over to my locker, pulled out a flash drive and plugged it into the lobby's public briefing monitor. Mrs. Miller, I said quietly, before you make a scene, you should watch what my body camera recorded when I breached the door. The monitor flickered to life. The night vision footage was crystal clear, black smoke billowing, the door being kicked down, and 2 naked bodies tangled together on the hardwood floor. The audio captured Samantha's soft, breathy voice perfectly. Julian, don't be scared, hold on. Her mother's face went from bright red to deathly pale in a fraction of a second. Her hand froze in midair. She wasn't trapped alone, Mrs. Miller, I said, my voice carrying across the silent lobby. She was in bed with her childhood best friend while I was breathing toxic fumes to save her. I waived all claim to the townhouse. She can have everything. All I want is my freedom. Her mother didn't say another word. She grabbed her purse and practically fled the station, her cousins shuffling awkwardly behind her. Within 2 weeks, the neighborhood knew the truth. Samantha tried to visit my apartment 3 times to beg me to talk, but I had already moved my belongings into the station dorms. She called me from dozens of burner numbers, leaving frantic, weeping voicemails. Logan, please. My parents are furious with me. Julian left for Paris and won't answer my calls. I was stupid, Logan. I was just confused. You're my husband. Please come home. I listened to the first message, deleted it, and blocked the number. A month later, the divorce papers were finalized. I signed them without asking for a single penny of alimony or property division. The day the court issued the decree, I handed in my transfer request to the chief. Are you sure about this, Logan? The chief asked, looking at me with genuine sympathy. You're our best squad leader. You have a bright future here. I need a fresh start, Chief, I said, bowing deeply. Somewhere near the coast. 3 days later, I packed my single duffel bag, boarded a train, and left the city I had lived in for 8 years. 5 years later, the coastal city of St. Jude was cold in the winter, but the sea breeze always smelled of salt and freedom. I stood on the training grounds of the Station 4 firehouse, wearing a captain's jacket with 3 silver bars on the collar. Captain Reed. The new equipment transport just arrived, a young recruit shouted, waving from the garage. On my way, I called back, smiling as I zipped up my coat. In 5 years, I had rebuilt my life from the ground up. I had poured my soul into my work, earning 2 bravery commendations and a promotion to station captain. The scars on my wrist had faded into a pale, faint line, a quiet reminder of a storm I had survived. A sleek blue sedan pulled into the station driveway. The driver's door opened, and Lily stepped out, wearing a warm cream-colored trench coat. In her arms was a 4-year-old boy with dark, messy hair and bright, intelligent eyes. Daddy, the little boy squealed, kicking his feet as soon as he spotted me. I broke into a wide, effortless smile, jogging over and scooping him into my arms, tossing him gently into the air while he giggled hysterically. Leo, what did I tell you about running on the wet pavement? I laughed, kissing his chubby cheek. Mommy bought me hot chocolate, Leo boasted, pointing a tiny mitten toward the paper cup Lily was holding. Lily walked over, setting the hot chocolate on the hood of my truck, then reached up to adjust my collar with natural, practiced affection. After I moved to St. Jude, Lily had applied for a nursing transfer to the city's Central Hospital a year later. She had been there for me during my darkest nights, never forcing me to talk, never demanding anything, simply offering a warm meal and a quiet shoulder to lean on. 3 years ago, we had married in a simple, private ceremony on the beach, surrounded by Mason and a few close friends. How was your shift, Captain? Lily asked, her eyes sparkling with warmth. Quiet, I smiled, wrapping my free arm around her waist and pulling her close. The best kind of shift. For the first time in my life, I knew what real love felt like. It wasn't a volatile, dramatic flame that burned down everything in its path. It was a steady, warm hearth that kept you safe from the cold. While my life was blooming in the sunlight, Samantha's world had crumbled into ash. After the divorce, Julian had returned from Paris 6 months later, broke and abandoned by his fashion sponsors. Having nowhere else to go, he moved back into the townhouse Samantha had kept. Without the romantic thrill of an affair, reality hit them like a freight train. Julian was lazy, arrogant, and financially dependent on Samantha's meager savings. He spent his days drinking expensive wine and throwing tantrums when his design drafts were rejected, while Samantha worked double shifts as a mid-level accountant to pay the mortgage. 2 years into their marriage, Samantha caught Julian in their bedroom with a young fashion intern. When she screamed at him, Julian had merely scoffed, throwing a glass at the wall. What are you crying for, Sam? Julian sneered, his voice full of cruel mockery. You cheated on Logan with me. Did you really think a woman who abandoned a heroic husband for a fling was someone I'd stay faithful to? You're pathetic. Julian packed his bags, took the remaining cash from her bank account, and vanished into thin air. Her parents, disgraced by the public scandal and bankrupt from paying off Julian's debts, cut ties with her. Her old friends refused to answer her calls. Sitting alone in the empty, dark townhouse, the same house where she had once laughed with Logan, Samantha finally realized the magnitude of what she had thrown away. Logan had loved her unconditionally. He had cooked her meals, held her through her nightmares, and put his life on the line every single day just to give her a future. And she had traded him for a parasitic coward. She began obsessively searching for news about Logan. She spent months tracking down firefighter union records, transfer logs, and public commendations until she finally found his name. Captain Logan Reed, Station 4, St. Jude Fire Department. She sold her remaining jewelry, bought a one-way bus ticket to St. Jude, and swore she would win him back. The annual statewide Firefighter Honors Gala was held at the Grand Regency Hotel in St. Jude. The grand ballroom was packed with hundreds of officers, city officials, and reporters. I sat at the head table alongside Lily, who looked radiant in a deep emerald dress, holding Leo on her lap as he drew pictures with a crayon. I had just received the governor's award for meritorious service after leading a daring rescue during a chemical plant explosion 2 months prior. As the ceremony concluded and guests began filtering out into the marble plaza outside the hotel, a disheveled woman suddenly broke through the crowd of reporters. Logan, the The voice was raspy, desperate, and shrill. I stopped, turning around. Standing 20 feet away was Samantha. She looked unrecognizable. Her once glossy hair was dull and messy, her skin pale and drawn, wearing a faded coat that was 2 sizes too big. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. Logan. She stumbled forward, ignoring the security guards who tried to step in her way. Logan, it's me. It's Samantha. The surrounding firefighters, reporters, and guests turned to look, murmuring in confusion. Mason, who was standing nearby with his wife, instantly stepped forward, his eyes narrowing in disgust. What the hell are you doing here, Samantha? Samantha ignored Mason entirely. She threw herself onto her knees right on the cold marble floor, crawling toward me, her hands reaching out desperately. Logan, please, she sobbed, her body shaking hysterically. I was wrong. I was so foolish. Julian ruined my life. He took everything from me. You're the only man who ever truly loved me, Logan. You're my only true love. She looked up at me, her eyes wild with a pathetic, desperate hope. I know you still care about me. You loved me for 8 years. Please, Logan. Give me a second chance. Take me home. The plaza fell completely silent. I stood there, holding Lily's hand, looking down at the woman kneeling in the dirt. In my mind, I remembered the night 5 years ago, the black smoke, the cold hospital hallway, and the brutal realization that my love had been betrayed. I had wept for her. I had bled for her. And now, looking at her weeping at my feet, I felt nothing. Not a single spark of anger. Not a single drop of pity. She was a complete, utter stranger. A young officer standing nearby whispered to his colleague in bewilderment. Is she crazy? Captain's kid is already in school, and his wife is right there. Why is she here begging for a second chance? A few female nurses from the hospital laughed openly, shaking their heads in disgust. She cheated on him years ago and abandoned him, and now that he's a captain and a decorated hero, she comes crawling back? How shameless can a person be? The mockery echoed across the plaza, cutting through the air like sharp knives. Samantha's face turned from pale to an ugly, burning red. She looked around at the judging faces, then looked back at me, her lips trembling. Logan, please. I didn't answer her. I turned to Lily, offering her a soft, gentle smile. Is Leo sleeping? Fast asleep, Lily replied softly, leaning her head against my shoulder. I scooped my 4-year-old son into my arms, resting his sleeping head against my shoulder, and wrapped my free arm around my wife's waist. I took 1 step forward, stepping right past the kneeling woman without looking down once. Logan, Samantha shrieked, reaching out to grab the hem of my pants. Excuse me, ma'am, I said, my voice cold, calm, and completely detached as I stepped out of her reach. You're blocking the exit. With those final words, I walked past her into the warm evening light, surrounding my real family, never looking back again.